Okay, so in this week's guitar lesson, we're going to talk about triads, which are simple 3-note chords, easy to play, and we're going to talk about how you can use them to compose meaningful sounding leads or melodic sounding leads. And you can do this when you're improvising, you can do this whether you're sitting down and composing something, but it's a really great method for creating a really cool sounding lead. So here's what we're going to be working towards. All right, so we're going to break that entire lead down note for note. I'll explain where all the notes come from, and we're going to do that over the course of 2 videos. In this video, we're going to go through the first half. If you'd like to watch the second video and also download the tablature for the entire solo and get the MP3 jam track so that you can practice playing everything we're going to talk about, you can get those extra materials for this lesson. Plus, I've thrown in a bonus video on the chord structure. But you can get all those extra materials for this lesson by going to activemelody.com, go to the weekly lessons page, and do a search for EP603. Okay, so as I mentioned, there's a little bonus video. I was going to put that into this, but it just became too much to try and talk through. So in that bonus video, I explained this chord structure where we have this 6-2-5-1 turnaround. It goes like this. You hear that in like old ragtime music, and so just sort of like what it is and why it works. I didn't want to get into all that in this video, so you can check out that extra video at Active Melody. So we're going to assume then that the chords are in place, and we're not going to explain why they're in place. We're just going to talk about what we do over these chords. So the G chord is our first chord, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a series of triads, and triads, as I mentioned, they're just 3-note chords, and we're going to be looking at the top 3 strings. This makes it even easier, and this is where most of your lead stuff comes from anyway. Well, I don't know, that for me it does anyway. So the first triad we're going to look at looks like this, and it's really just the top part of your G bar chord using the E shape. It's the top 3 strings. So that's the first one we're going to look at, and we're going to use that for the first little lick that goes, and that lick to me is just an extension of this triad. And once you can see the triad, you can see the lick. So play the triad first, and then what I want you to do is slide with your middle finger, go down a fret, and slide into the 4th fret, and then come up to the 2nd string and play 3, 5, and then come up to the 3rd fret and play the 1st string. So you have... Now, even if you get nothing else, that lick right there is a blues must-know. It's in everything. That kind of thing. It's a very powerful little blues lick. And it's blending the major and minor pentatonic scales, which is what I love about it. So anyway, when I played that, I came in on the 2. So if you listen to the jam track, let's play this first part, and you'll notice I come in, if you're counting it, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So right on the 2. So hopefully you can see that little G triad there. And here's your G note as a reference. So if you want to use this in the future, just find the note for the chord that you're looking for. If you're doing it in A, you find your A note, and that's your little lick. And this to me is how solos are constructed, or this is how I do it, as I learn licks like this and they become part of my vocabulary. And so when I'm playing something, I can remember some of these things. You're going to forget a lot of them. Actually, you'll forget probably 80% of what you learned, but you'll relearn them down the road. That's just sort of how it works. Licks kind of come and go through your brain. So don't worry about it if you're like, wait, I can't remember all of this stuff. That's totally normal. Okay, so now is where the song goes to the C7 chord, and I play this. Now this is a very interesting thing, and this will be a big light bulb for a lot of you. Maybe you didn't realize this, but when you're playing any song, like especially a blues, you go from the 1 chord to the 4 chord. When you get to the 4 chord, did you know that you could play the minor 1 chord? The triad of it, just to represent your 4 chord. So in the key of G, you play your 1 chord, your G chord. Then when the song goes to the C7, I could play a G minor, and that would work over my C7 chord. And if you analyze sort of why, if I were to play a C7, but have that minor triad in there, you can hear what I'm playing is actually a C9. So inside of a C9 is that G minor chord. So it makes it very easy when you're improvising a solo to do something over the 1 chord and then just flat the 3rd, play the same kind of lick or idea, and that will work for the 4 chord. It's kind of cool. So what I ended up playing was, I kind of did it backwards. So I slid into the 3rd string, went down a fret, just kind of like we did before, but now we go down to the 2nd fret, slide up to the 3rd, play the 3rd fret 1st string, and then the 5th fret 2nd string. So you have this. So when you put those 2 licks together, you have, and that's the 1 chord and the 4 chord. Then the song goes back to the 1 chord, and I just did the same thing. I went, threw in a little different timing. You got to mix up the timing a little bit to make it interesting. And so all I did for that was, but you can see it's just coming out of that G triad. So at this point in the song, we go to that 6-2-5-1 turnaround, and the 6 and the 2 are majors. It's a major 6 and a major 2. I explained that in that extra video that I'm talking about, or that I mentioned. But your chords for that would be an E7, which is the 5 chord of A7. So there's your 6 and 2. A7 is the 5 chord of D7, which is the 5 chord of G. So it's a series of 5 chord. You play the 5 chord of the 5 chord of the 5 chord of the 1 chord. I know it sounds complicated, but anyway, I'll explain more about that in that video. Those are called secondary dominant chords, by the way. And I'll put up a lesson on the screen right now if you want more information on what is, what a secondary dominant chord is. But that first chord is an E chord. It's an E7. And so what I played was this. I played an E7 triad right here. And actually, I only played strings 3 and 1 out of it. Although I made the chord with the intent to play the full triad. I just played those 2 like the harmony, the harmonized 6. And what I'm doing for that is, first of all, I was here, remember? And so I'm asking myself, as I'm playing the lead and the song is going to that E chord, I'm asking, where's my nearest E? You always want to find, well, not always, but it sounds good when you find your nearest chord voicing, the nearest note, because it sounds more fluid when you do it that way. So that was the last note I played, was my G. If I come up 1 fret, I'm playing the 3rd interval of my E chord out of this triad. Now that may seem complicated, and honestly there was no thought process that went into that. That was just an ear thing. You learn to hear. I knew the song was going to this, and so I knew I could just go up 1 pitch. That's how I think of it in real time, is my ear just hears the pitch. I don't even know that's the 3rd interval of the E chord until after the fact. I analyze what it is. But that's what I'm doing. And then once I'm in this position, my brain goes, oh yeah, now we're in this E position. I can do E stuff. So what I'm doing here is I'm playing this E triad. And think about your E chord in first position. You've got this little triad. Think of like Red House. So I'm saying that just to sort of put it in perspective. I realize Red House was in a different key, but it's the same concept that's going on there for that little triad. And here's another little thing that maybe you didn't know or hadn't thought about, but you can take this triad and move it up 3 frets, 1, 2, 3, and that'll work also to represent your E chord. And what you're doing actually is you're kind of playing the top 3 strings of that dominant 7 diminished chord, which is a movable chord, right? But anyway, what I played was here on the 4th fret, strings 3 and 1. And then I came up to the 7th fret and also played strings 3 and 1. And that both of those represent my E chord. And then I went to get to the A. This is where the song goes from the E to the A. And so I'm asking myself again, where's my nearest A? Oh yeah, I've got an A right here using the E shape. So I just go from here to that triad. The same triad we played for the G chord. We're just up here and now. So I played it like this, 7th fret, and then I come into position for this A. And when I'm playing that, I'm hybrid picking. So I'm picking on the 3rd string with my pick, and then I'm using my ring finger to pluck the 1st string to get both notes at the same time. And then the song goes to the D chord, which is the 5 chord of the song, and then we go back to the G chord. So for the D, I went, and then back to my G. So this D, let me show you what I'm doing here. I'm borrowing the first 3 strings on the 7th fret, and I'm playing strings 3, 2, 1, back to 3. So it's 3, 2, 1, 3 in terms of order. Then I use my pinky to come up here to the 10th fret 1st string, back to that 7th fret 1st string, and all of that is off of this triad here, which represents my D chord. Now, you may want to pause the video here and just quiz yourself and say, why would that be a D chord? Like, how does that represent a D? What is that? What's going on? I'll assume you've paused the video and tried that. Always try and work this stuff out yourself first if you can. But what's happening is, if you listen to the D in the bass, that sounds like a D6. Well, it is a D6. It's a D6. I can slide that down 2 frets and play a D9. And so it's actually a minor triad. It'd be like a B minor triad. Like if I put a B in the bass, now you hear something totally different versus a D in the bass, right? So here's what I do is I connect it to this chord shape. That's my A shape. This is my D chord, D note on the 5th fret, 5th string. There's my D chord using the A shape. I can look at the top 3 strings of this 7th fret and the top 3 strings of this 5th fret to get a 6 chord on the 7th fret, a 9 chord on the 5th fret. It's just one of those things. And so what that means is I can use those triads in my solo. So I can go like little licks and things off of those triads. And that's exactly what I did here for my D. So I played a D6 coming up to this D note up here, and then down to my G here. It's just kind of a cool way to do that. Isn't that an awesome sound when you've got your A? You've got your D that comes up and does that little dance, and then you come down to your G here. And then there's a little turnaround where I played, which is just a sort of a classic blues down to the 5 chord, or the 5 note rather, 5th fret, 5th string. So what I'm doing there is on the 2nd string, I go 5, 4, 3, down to the 5th fret, 3rd string, and then we do a hammer-on between the 3rd fret and the 4th fret on the 3rd string. 5th fret, 4th string, 5th fret, 5th string, and all together it goes like that. And so here's what I want you to take away out of this. It's these little chromatic ideas. So and I'm thinking about all of this off of my G chord here, using the E shape. Really just this triad, actually. In this triad, and this will be a big takeaway, is of some ideas. So on this 1st string, out of this triad here, I can walk up to that 5th fret 1st string. Now that note, if I play that while the jam track is playing a G, and land on that note, that would sound like a G9. It's got that 9 sound. And I could do the same little chromatic walk up on the 2nd string. I can go, so 3, 4, 5, that's the fret numbers. And if I land on that note, it's gonna sound like a G6. So I've got got those ideas. And then down on the third string, I can walk it up chromatically there, 2, 3, 4, and I'm coming up to the third interval of the chord. All I'm doing when I'm doing these little ideas is I'm playing through the notes of the major scale of that chord, and I'm going from the previous interval and going up chromatically to the next interval. So in other words, if there's your scale, and I go from 1 to 2, now from this 2 I can go walk up to my 3. You can see, and I'm just walking up chromatically. Hopefully a light bulb's going off and you go, oh, that's all that is. When you hear those little licks, you're just walking chromatically from point to point in the major scale of the chord. That's it. So all of those ideas there are really coming from notes of the major scale. All right, so now the song repeats. We're going to play through the same chords, but I'm going to be using some of the ideas I just talked about, some of these chromatic ideas. So we go back to the G chord, and I'm thinking about that same G triad, and I play this. That's my lick. So it's basically the same thing we did the first time. We're sliding into that 4th fret 3rd string. We come up to the 2nd string, play the 3rd fret, and then I go to the 5th fret, and then I come to this fret. Now this fret is not necessary, that's the 4th fret. That note is not in your major pentatonic or your minor, but it's one of those chromatic notes. And that's why it works. As long as you use it in passing, you don't land on it. You can do all kinds of things with that. Then the song goes to the C7, and I played. And all I'm doing there is on the 1st string, I do the same kind of idea where I go between the 3rd fret and the 5th fret. And so I'm thinking about my C triad here, right? Top part of the A shape. But I'm also thinking about my C7 here, this little triad. So I'm going, and I'm hitting that flat 7 out of that triad. And so once you can see these notes from your triads, the whole thing becomes easy. And I realize it's difficult in the beginning, but just get your dominant 7, those flat 7 notes, and your 3rd and your 1st. If you could just concentrate on those, like if you can see the 1, the 3, and the flat 7, you can do most things. So there's the G, there's the C7. Then I go back to the G, same thing we did the first time, and then when the song goes to the E, I went, and look at this, I just did kind of what I did the first time, but instead of playing the full chord, I slid into the 3rd interval of the E chord, and so my ear could hear that same little transition from the G to the 3rd interval of the E by sliding from the 3rd fret to the 4th fret on the 1st string, come up here and grab this 7th fret 1st string, back to the 4th fret, and then the 5th fret 2nd string, which is my E note. And I'm thinking about my E triad there. And what I'm picturing is this E arpeggio right here, using the C shape. Now the song comes up here and goes to the A, and then it goes to the D. And I played something that I got from Mark Knopfler. I remember learning this off of Neck and Neck, Mark Knopfler, Chet Atkins. So this little lick is doing that same little thing we talked about, doing these chromatic moves. So here's my A chord using the E shape, walking up to the 9, right? Like the A9, holding out there. Then we go back to the A, and then we come down to the 2nd string for our D chord using the A shape. So look at that, let that be another idea. So off of this A shape, you've got a chromatic thing on the, actually you've got one on the 1st string, 2nd string, and 3rd string you can do in this position. You can go down to the flat 7, all of that's done inside of that shape. That's another idea for you to explore. So we have off of the A, And then I came down here to the 3rd fret 2nd string to get into position for the G chord. And I concluded with a little G lick, which is minor pentatonic scale, major pentatonic scale blended, where I'm doing a slide. This actually kind of connects back to last week's lesson on the slidey lick. So I'll put the tab up for that. I won't break that down for note, but you can see what's happening there. It's G minor pentatonic scale pattern 1, major pentatonic scale pattern 2, and they're blended here. And then back to my G note on top. So I'm going to conclude this part 1 video there. That's a lot of information. Come join us for part 2 where we go over the second half. And remember, there's a bonus video where I just explain, why these chords sort of fit together, or what's going on chord-wise, for those of you that are interested in the structure of the song and sort of why that part of it works. And remember, you can also get the tablature for the entire thing and the MP3 jam track, so you can practice playing through all of this stuff. All right, we'll see you in part 2. Oh, and leave a comment and let me know if you like this video or if any of this has resonated. I always appreciate that. I read through all of them. Super helpful. If any of it's confusing, let me know that too. This is how I get better and adjust things as I need to. All right, we'll see you in part 2.